Hi everyone, I'm Tianna Spears. I'm an apprentice developer at Code the Dream, and I'm looking forward to my conversation today with Quay Weston, Code the Dream alum and senior UX designer at Paylocity, as part of our Juneteenth celebration of education and technology. Hey Quay, thanks so much for joining me today. How's it going? And if you'd like to start with a brief introduction, that would be great, and we can share a little bit about our backgrounds and involvement in tech and education.
Yeah. Thanks, and thanks for interviewing me. I'm looking forward to it. Been looking forward to it for the last several weeks. So yeah, I'm Quay again, as you said, Quay Weston. I'm from Pantego, North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, but reside now in Durham, North Carolina. A little bit about me. I won't go into too much detail because we'll talk through it. Um, have been designing things all my life. Started in high school back in like 2006, 7. Um, Self-taught in that way. And then I've always just had a love for technology, education, art, and how to combine those things. So that's kind of led me to a kind of ongoing evolution in the tech space. So really glad to be here and glad to be talking with you.
Nice, thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, I believe you were in the React class at Code the Dream in 2019, was that?
2019, I'm pretty sure, unless I got the year wrong. But yes, front end, one of their early front end web development cohorts. I was jumped into that program. It was like an evening program. So I would work all day and then go to that a couple of days a week. But yeah, it was incredible.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Quite the experience. I'd love to hear how much it's changed since now,
Hmm.
like what those early classes look like. Because I know that, I mean, that was 6 years ago, and they've had,
Yes.
excuse me, plenty of cohorts that have come in and everything. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Code the Dream classes now, but what was it
I,
like for you? I'm curious.
um, yeah, I mentored someone who was in a cohort in 20, what year was that? Oof, 23 maybe. But also was interested in UX and UX research. So I have a little bit of an idea how the classes go now, but yeah, very far removed from them. When I was in the cohort, it was kind of split. So you had a larger group who actually went through the class, um, and that kind of slowly dwindled down as people could like figure out their capacity and time and work stuff. So I think we started with like 20 some people and ended with maybe 12 of us. Um, but then some of the folks in our cohort moved into the apprenticeship, which I didn't move into the apprenticeship. Um, and I think it was something around obviously everybody couldn't go straight into the apprenticeship then. And then we also didn't have as like robust of the like ending projects. As I've heard like some of my peers who in the last couple of years I've gone to some of like the co-working days and people talk about what kind of projects they're doing. We didn't have that extensive of projects to deliver on. So that seems like the big shift. So that's been pretty neat to see.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you had a good experience at Code the Dream and it led into your career now. I'm just curious. I know we talked a little bit, like we have several questions that we can discuss, but specifically regarding the intersection of education and technology,
Hmm.
what role can technology play in empowering students, especially those who are marginalized?
Yeah. I think there's many ways. Um, I actually used to work with middle schoolers, excuse me. Well, first grade previously and then into middle school, some high school. So I think we are in a time where obviously everybody's talking about AI and things, but I think overall, right, there's like the big kind of zoomed out technology that I think a lot about in even kids from places like where I'm from, which is Eastern North Carolina, rural North Carolina. It's like 160 people. Um, and our access to technology was one challenge, but then also um, how students there. in areas that don't have like extensive extracurricular activities, big STEM programs, robotics things like a city like Durham might have. I think that's some of what technology can help close the gap on. Is like how can students keep in touch with what's happening technologically, what advances are happening, but also finding ways to experiment and learn things on their own, which is how I spend a lot of my time. I'm exploring things, learning about things, and testing them out. So I think that's one of the big things, be it rural students, be it students who don't have as much access to technology, access to big fancy libraries, things like that. Um, that's what I'm feeling right now.
Okay. Nice, nice. And that kind of goes into our next question. Let's see. Okay, and great. So that just branches back into the impact of education and your personal experience. I'm just really curious, what difference has education made in your path, your career, and your lived experience? It doesn't have to necessarily be about school, but it could be things taught to you by your parents, self-study.
Mm.
I know you mentioned your project before. So I'm just curious what impact education has had on your experience.
Yeah. I'm a person who loves to learn, so I think that's like the main thing that kind of helps. But also I always look for kind of like non-conventional ways to learn things. A lot of my learning style is like experimentation, so like learning by doing things. I can hear the information, I can hear the instructions, but if I'm not like actively following along or like repeating the steps, it's really hard for me to like learn something. So I've yeah, found myself learning from people like fishing, right? Like I was always like monitoring my grandparents or my aunts or uncles fish and like what are the steps? How do they do this thing? How do they yeah, how do they really fish a specific kind of way? And then like I just kind of mimic the action. So
Mhm.
that's one thing. Similarly, like art classes, music, I learn like even how to play instruments by like listening to people play things. Um, what else? Yeah, my favorite type of classrooms were the ones where the teacher would like throw out a thing and then we'd like work in groups to figure out the answer to it. So it's also very collaborative. So education has been like for me every step of the way like an opportunity to like learn a new skill or share a skill or mentor or brush up on my own skills by sharing them with someone else. So those are, yeah, and I'm self-taught in a lot of things, not everything, but a lot of
Mhm.
things, um, including design, and just found like a passion for it and started to learn like different little pieces that led me to being in the UX field, um, which is where Code the Dream came in because I was interested in designing software and knew I had design skills, but was like, I don't understand how the code works, or what people do to make these things real. So that was a part of me taking the Code the Dream cohort. And for me, it was like short enough. It was at good times. It was consistent enough. And I could also say like, I'm finished with it and I'm done. And I'm not like doing this thing for 10 years. So that was helpful for me and my personality. And so, yeah. Always listening, always taking the information, and I love like reading things as a way to like get information. But that's not hands-on in the same way. So finding ways to put things to practice is usually how I get to where I want to be.
Is there any design software or
Hmm.
like creative platform that you started
Mhm.
off with when you were younger? 'Cause
Mhm.
most of us millennials, I think that our intro to HTML,
Mhm.
CSS, and maybe a little bit of JavaScript was MySpace.
Correct.
So
Correct.
just
100%.
because when I started the intro class at Code the Dream, I was like, oh, this is familiar. I remember my
Yeah.
so I'm just curious if there's something in
Yeah.
particular that got you into design and excited about it.
Yeah. Good question. So I used to make music, and I m- built like a community of people in my very rural town. Um, through music, but a lot of those people started wanting their MySpace profiles to be customized. So I learned Photoshop to make web pages, so like banners and those custom like GIFs that used to float in the back, and like the little the people who aren't in the millennial age of life, I know they are having a will have a hard time processing this, but we get it, so that matters. So, yeah, the floating like GIF things, um, like even updates when they started allowing you to have like music players, we were always like tinkering with things. So I was always tinkering with things. So I started to design those things for people as like a $20 project that people would pay me through PayPal to be able to do these things. And I'm like 16, I don't have a bank account, none of it. I'm just like collecting PayPal checks for designing MySpace profiles, and that's where it started. Um yeah, so I learned Photoshop. I think I downloaded it through LimeWire, which was probably a terrible idea. Um but yeah, it worked, and I made it happen. Started to learn all the things around Photoshop that I could, and that led to some more like exploration of design. Yep.
Oh, that's a great story because
Yeah.
I know a lot of design or the things that
Hmm.
I think sometimes we end up doing as adults are things that we're definitely interested in as children, or
Hmm.
there are
Hmm.
similarities, definitely.
Hmm.
And it's just interesting hearing about your MySpace journey,
Yeah.
about your side hustle and everything
Yeah.
to, to where you are now, you know? So
Yeah.
it's great to hear. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
That was a good time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and as we talk about the past and like the old school technologies, I
Hmm.
guess, as the kids would say,
Hmm.
emerging technologies do you think hold the most promise for future innovation, the intersection of education and technology?
Hmm. Yeah, I am thinking a lot about some of the work I kind of learned in my like very first UX role, which was through like federal government, so very like slow, more like modernization efforts. But a lot of I became certified in like Section 508, which is like accessibility guidelines. So I started to like test the software for any discrepancies. And then think about ways or create plans to remediate accessibility issues. So learned a lot about like assistive technologies like screen readers, like eye tracking, um, how like voiceover things work with software. So I think that is an emerging technology that I'm thinking most about, and like how, again, all the focus is on like AI and like large language models, but I think there are some ways to think about how AI can be utilized to increase accessibility. So that's where a lot of my thought is right now. Like, how can we make it easier to translate things for people? How can we make it easier for people who use screen readers to process information on pages or in applications? How do people um, engage AI if they are like hard of hearing or deaf? Like that's a question. And I think all these technologies could be useful in kind of opening that up for people. And then also like people with like cognitive or social emotional challenges, like how do we bring in that level of thought in our work, in our design, in our technologies, as we're building new software that might have less screens, for example. It might be just like voice activated. So there are some things there that I think would be really cool to dig into for myself, but for others too. Yeah.
Nice. And are there any challenges and or opportunities that you see at the intersection of education and technology?
Yes. Um, I won't go on a spiral, I promise. I think some of the challenges are will I think the challenge is to like how are we proactive in development of new softwares and technologies and not just reactive to things, right? Which includes like how do we think about environment as it relates to developing and accelerating technology? How do we think about, right? We were recently just talking about heat, right? And how hot it is generally, right? And we know um, how particular types of like climate things can impact weather, heat specifically. So I think that's one of the challenges that feels important to think about. How are we learning about impacts and how do we then like do something different? Similar with education, I think one of the things is like how I've been thinking about recently is like how do we um bring in like more experiential learning into spaces that isn't just like information based, because right now again this AI wave and these all these like chat things, generative models. It's just like, oh, I can ask a thing for information and it will give me information. But that doesn't mean that we know it, right? And it doesn't mean that I can take those things and like apply it to my life immediately. So we have to be thoughtful about that. Um, and I think that's the kind of tension is like amazing technology, but then how do we translate that into like action and like actually a kind of growing realm of like knowledge that we can actually use for something beneficial. Um, that's yeah, I think that's some of the challenge. And then like where there's gaps and people or communities are missing out, right? Or like not um as kind of on the like front end of the innovation, like how do we bring people along so that they are aware of what types of new technologies exist and how to use them, and also like yeah, don't get left behind because the rate is kind of faster than it seems like we can even keep up with right now. There's always something new every day. It's like a new tool, a new platform. Um, yeah, and it's really hard to keep up with.
Oh, that's a good point. There's so much that's just going on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And just to, I mean, of course, it keeps you very curious and interested in learning
Mm-hmm.
new things and exploring. But I think one of the downfalls and challenges, I guess, of having AI or any type of technology like that is that
Mm-hmm.
it may take away a bit of our creativity,
Mm-hmm.
our
That's
problem
it.
solving skills, and just our way of relating to others. Because,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have it here, I can just go ahead and put it in here. It'll give me the answer,
Yep.
and I can run with it.
Yep.
Whereas we're, on like the entire process from start to
Yep.
finish.
Yep.
Um, so it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how we approach that in the future, especially I just think about college students having this
Mm-hmm.
tool. And when we were in university, we didn't have tools like this.
Yeah.
So I mean there were other resources, but nothing like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, just to have that at your hands, and you have to really be careful with it because you
Yep.
don't want to later, years later, not have the skills, capacity, and resources to produce the same thing and even
Yeah.
better. So
Yeah. And like so much of learning is like not knowing the thing and struggling to learn the thing. Like that's a part of the process. It's not just like, oh, I can just find the answer. That's not learning, right? And that I think that's you're exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I say that as someone who like developers, we use ChatGPT all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Great for debugging, but I've been using more prompting for like, hey, explain this to me like I'm a beginner.
Mm, yep.
Don't give me the answer to this. How would a senior level software developer think through this problem?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What am I missing here? Here's what I'm thinking. And
Yep.
it's been, of course, I feel even more stretched, but
Mm,
it's just once again being intentional about
yep.
anything in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, just in regarding education and technology, how do you think it can help in preserving and revitalizing Black cultural heritage and history?
Yeah, I put a lot into this thought into this question. Um, yeah, I think some of what feels really important um and a little concerning, right? Is I think we there's things that technology can do for us um in terms of like archiving things, keeping record of things, finding doing research on history, like accurate history and cultural heritage. And then there is this element of technology that feels very much like ancient technology, like having a conversation with someone, for example. right? We don't think much about it. We don't, sometimes we kind of take it for granted. But there are there's so much learning, at least from where I'm from and the people who raised me. Like there's so much learning that happens when you're doing a thing with others. Um, even as simple as having a conversation, right? So if you're sitting around somewhere, table, porch, wherever, with friends and family, there's just elements of it that are elements of engaging with people in that way that is educational. So you might learn something new about your friend who you haven't seen in 6 months because they've been doing all this other stuff. And then you find out like they're having a really hard time with something. New thing, right? And or you're talking with your family and you're finding out like, oh, this relative and your aunt don't get along because of some random thing, right? But there's so I think there's a way that like education is really important to the preservation, but and I think that technology could be used to help us do that, right? So for example, I'm working on this family project called the Yonder Project, which is a like creative history, like this creative storytelling project focused on like oral histories from my elders. And there's learning there in like the conversations around the history of how we got to the place that our family is from. Um, there's learning about the history surrounding that time, right? My great grandmother was born in the Great Depression. So, like, what does that mean? What does that mean for them in that small town in North Carolina? But what does that mean for the state? What does that mean for the world or the country? Even at that point, and all those things kind of add up, right? So, I think there's ways, and a part of that project is like recording the conversations and using the technology to transcribe the interviews, to publish the interviews. Um, so that's a way. I also think like there's creative ways to use technology to teach history where it may not be allowed or welcomed at this point in life. Um, and it also even around like Juneteenth, we right, but that's kind of the theme of this. We're focusing on that. Even the learnings around Juneteenth and places, um, which places adhered to this like proclamation of freedom and which places did not, or how long people in. I just got back from New Orleans for anniversary trip. How long people even after that were still in some level of like bondage in one way or another, um, is incredible to know. And I wouldn't have known that, right, without being able to research it and like hear some of these interviews for myself. So I think there's like a tie of like the cultural practices amongst Black people that feels really important, just like at a base level. And then there's also like how can we use technology to kind of like amplify it and make it easier, more accessible. I think that's kind of the big tie to that question. So long way to say there's a lot of opportunities and it feels really important and necessary to me right now. Yeah.
No, 100%. But I'm curious, is there
Mhm.
anything that got you started in the like the creation of the family
Mhm.
project and the Yonda project?
Ooh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, good question. So yeah, 2020, my great grandmother who raised me passed away. And during that time, it was also like April 2020. So like COVID was really a thing. We didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on really. And we were all trying to figure it out. So I think that big loss in that window, while also like the chaos of the world and everything around us, um, I kind of went into a like, how do I process my grief kind of mode. Um, And yeah, I think from that spawned some ideas around like how do I reconnect to my hometown or my family without like our kind of central figure there? What do relationships look like between like my aunts and uncles now that their moms passed away? What do relationships look like between me and my grandparents? Yeah, my mom, siblings, without our kind of like central person, and we all had to process that differently. So I was curious about like the history of the place, how we got to the place, like all the existential stuff. Why did they choose Pantego? Why did they stay there? Why didn't you leave? So like all of these questions started coming up, and I thought, yeah, I could just like talk to my great aunts and like elders and ask them questions and record the conversations because I also thought it would be important for um my siblings, my younger brother, for example, to know this stuff because he's not interested, right? Like you're in high school, he's like, whatever. I don't care. I'm not asking my questions. I just want to leave. So it was a little bit of that, like both answering questions for myself, but also like how do we share these conversations to help kind of mend other relationships. Um, and that kind of led to, yeah, writing a book about it, doing some other kind of artistic work around it, and then just continuing to keep it going in my creative practice, even up to now. So it's been a very long process, but I think it'll be a like never ending life project. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
What an amazing tribute to your great grandmother as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just preserving the culture. And I mean, I can't imagine being able to have some family members' voices
Hmm.
like, so I can only imagine what
Hmm.
that feels like on like a spiritual, emotional,
Hmm.
like all the levels, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And just having that connection to the past and it
Yeah.
being so, I want to say visual, but there is something visual in hearing a voice that
Hmm.
you remember, and that may sound like another family
Hmm.
member as well.
Yep.
Um, so I think it's like great, amazing work what you're doing, and I'm really
Thank you.
excited to, yeah, you're welcome to learn more about it. And like I think it's so important,
Hmm.
learning about Pantego. I grew up in Durham, and I
Yeah.
not know about Pantego until we talked last week. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's to learn. Like
Hmm.
it's great. So thanks so much for sharing that with me.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Thank you for asking about it. Yeah. Really appreciate it. Most people, to your credit, most people have not heard of Pantego, even people who live near it. So don't worry. It's not, you're not the only one. But I'm trying to, trying to put us on the map, because we're generally not. So,
I think you definitely are, though. I think you definitely, especially after this interview too.
you know, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Do what you can. Do what you can.
You got to, you got to.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you would like to add with this conversation? Any other thoughts, or if not, it's okay. But I'm just curious if you have anything else you'd like to mention.
Yeah. Not really. I think I just want to say, like, I'm glad and grateful that Code a Dream is here and able to connect people across waters, places, histories, cultures. I'm grateful that they're still doing that, and being thoughtful about what their work looks like. I'm also grateful that like I was a part of one of Code the Dreams cohorts because it definitely like influenced my trajectory into this like tech and software space, but um also kind of made me think of other ways to like bring my other skills into my work, right? So I think it's easy in like transitioning from I was doing like working at a credit union at the time I started with Code the Dream. So like that shift also kind of helped me realize like yeah, I do have other skills that I could literally use in a career. And yeah, I've known how to design things for a long time. So yeah, maybe this software development bootcamp does make sense because like I'm already kind of doing it. But in a different way. So yeah, I'm grateful to have been a part of their story and them a part of mine and like ours. So that feels cool. Um, yeah. So yeah, that's what I'll say as my last thing.
Nice. I mean, you've got a really great point. I think one of the things that Code the Dream does is, I mean, it's scary to change careers. It's scary to
Hmm.
try something new, and I think they do an amazing job of making the transition as smooth as possible.
Hmm.
Um, in particular for those who are like branching out, and
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, you're starting new, you're starting over, but you still have skills
That's right.
and just in being reminded of that, it's done a lot for my confidence in the
Hmm.
program. Just knowing
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm doing something new, yes, but we're never starting from zero. Like we have all the
That's right.
paths experiences and life lessons
Hmm.
and knowledge that we carry with us. So we're never really starting right from scratch. So
Yep.
I think you make a really good point of that.
Yeah.
And it's one of my many things, my many favorite things about Code the
Hmm.
Dream. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing your story with me today, with us.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and your thoughts. And thank you so much for just taking the time out to talk with me.
Yeah. Thanks, Tiana. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.